Because what Chandler had done that night, he had dismembered his parents. Broken saw blades, hand saws, scissors. And the best way out of your pretend job is an even more pretend job. In Florida, for Elon Musk, he's going to be an astronaut. My name is William Brown. I'm the Deputy District Attorney of Dane County. Our job is to, over the course of the next couple of weeks, present evidence to show you the path of what we believed happened, which is that Chandler Halderson killed his parents, dismembered their bodies, and hid them around southern Wisconsin. That's Bart and Krista Halderson, a couple in their early 50s, living in Windsor, Wisconsin. A quiet street, in a quiet house, kind of in a quiet town. That's the Halderson home. At this point, perhaps it would be best if I told you a little bit about the Halderson family. Bart, the father, Krista, the mother. They have two sons, Chandler and his older brother, Mitchell. Living in the Halderson home was Bart Halderson, Krista Halderson, and Chandler. Mitchell had moved out. Now, all of the events I'm going to describe, for the most part, take place during the first week of July. If you remember this year, the 4th of July was on a Sunday. Everyone celebrated, of course, all weekend. A lot of places celebrated on Saturday. But the 4th of July was on a Sunday. So as I say things up here, what I'm saying is what I expect to prove in the next couple of weeks. But what I expect to prove beyond any reasonable doubt is that on July 1st, 2021, somewhere between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., Chandler Halderson murdered his parents. But the story doesn't start there. And this trial wouldn't be 3 to 4 weeks if the trial ended there. The story starts a week later, on July 7th, nearly a week after killing his parents, but no one in the world knowing. Chandler Halderson walks into the Northeast Precinct of the Dane County Sheriff's Office and says, "I'd like to file a missing persons report." He sits down with sheriff's deputies, and you'll meet them today, and he gives a long story. "My parents, they just haven't come back from the cabin. They were there this weekend. We have a cabin up north. It's in White Lake, up in Langlade County. It's pretty far up north, a couple of hours. They were going to come back Monday or Tuesday, and I don't know where they are." "Who were they with?" the deputies ask. "I don't know. I helped them pack Thursday night. And they must have left Friday early before I woke up at 6. "Who'd they go with?" "I don't know." "Where are their cars?" "Well, they're still at the house." "What'd you help them pack?" "Bottles of liquor, lots of money, tools, silver bars." "Why were they going up there?" Some people they were fixing a window. Some people there was a plumbing issue, storm damage. The story varied. Sometimes they took just money. Sometimes they took just liquor. But over that day and the next, talking to numerous sheriff's deputies, detectives, including those detectives, he gives this bizarre story of his parents leaving in an unknown car, going to a cabin with an unknown couple, with an unknown amount of money, for really an unknown reason. So sheriff's deputies do what cops do, which is they ask him, "Have you heard from him?" And he says, "Yeah, I got a text from my mom." And he did. He showed him his phone, made it safely. This is from Krista Halderson to Chaz. That's what his family calls him. Not Chandler, they call him Chaz. Made it safely. Can't get anything through, though. Yes, it's packed. Going to White Lake today for the parade. We'll be home Monday night, Tuesday early. I love you lots. So at this point, the sheriff's deputies don't know what they're dealing with. These folks get up there and decide, we're going to go to the casino for a few days. We're going to play hooky. Didn't make a lot of sense. They started talking to coworkers and realized these people had never no-call, no-showed, missed work, which they both did on Friday. Did they crash their car? Did this other couple kidnap them? But what good police do, and what they did in this case, is they start looking into the people who saw them last, who were with them last, who reported them missing. And in this case, all three of those things, the person who purportedly saw them last, was with them last, and reported them missing were the same person. It was Chandler Halderson. So what the police did was started to look into Chandler Halderson. This is all occurring in the same 24-hour, 48-hour period. And what they learn about him isn't suspicious at all. Madison College student. He's about to graduate. He's studying renewable resource engineering, kind of a hybrid IT degree with solar panels, things of that sort. He's about to get a certificate. He'd recently been working at American Family Insurance. He's working from home like most of us the last couple of years. But he's working a good job at American Family Insurance. And not only was he working a good job, Chandler had just gotten a better job. He got hired at SpaceX. He was about to embark on a career that people in the IT field could only dream of. He's planning to move to Titusville, Florida. That's where SpaceX operation is, down in Florida, with his girlfriend. They'd rented an apartment. They'd bought a car. And not only was this not someone who was antisocial, he was pro-social. He was working with the Madison Police and the Department of Natural Resources on their rescue diving team. He was a scuba diver, working with the police. The only thing that was a bit odd is he'd recently suffered a head injury, fallen down the stairs, had terrible concussion, had to wear a neck brace. He was permanently, perhaps, injured. All of those things threw police off from thinking it was Chandler. And at that point, for all they knew, as sad as it is, Bart and Krista and an unknown couple were crashed into a ditch somewhere between here and White Lake, Wisconsin, dead from a car crash. So they started looking. Deputies are sent up north. The Langlade County Sheriff's Department is searching a cabin. No one had ever been there. It didn't look like anyone had been there at all in years. So the police expand their search, and they start talking to not only just Chandler, They start talking to people who were with Chandler that weekend. Specifically, they talked to his girlfriend, a young girl named Catherine. She goes by Kat. And Kat says, I was with him like all weekend. We had a normal 4th of July weekend. We went out, family's farm, we got a farm, there was a pool, we ate dinner. Chandler was having the concussion issue and he couldn't really move his legs, and so he asked to use their pool the next day because he thought that was good therapy. So the police, what do they do next? They go talk to the person who owns the farm. And they say, was Chandler out here? And she goes, yeah, he was out here on the 4th of July. But you know what? He showed up the next day by himself. He showed up the next day by himself. I told him he could come back anytime, as we just say to people, not expecting they're gonna roll into your house the next day. She says he was acting bizarre, said that he had a doctor's appointment and they'd given him some bad news that he was gonna lose his job at SpaceX because he couldn't travel, he couldn't attend orientation. And she goes, he asked to use the pool. And of course I said yes. This woman will testify and she'll tell you that she sat in her house for a while, perhaps a bit weirded out that someone had just shown up at her rural farm, but she let him have his space. But about an hour later, she goes down to the pool to check on him. He's not there. But she sees his car, and it's parked out in a field, away from the pool, backed in toward where that grass is a bit longer, and had its hatch up. She thought, boy, that was strange. But she thought maybe he's just on a walk. So she goes in the pool. She said, I'm just gonna go in the pool. If you remember that weekend, it's extraordinarily hot. She starts swimming. She says, then I see Chandler. He's walking out of the woods in that area. Now, at this point in the investigation, the police are out there with this woman. They're out on the farm, and she says he walked out over there. And you'll hear from the detective who was out there, and he'll tell you that his eyes kind of shifted up, and he saw vultures. The police walked about 20 yards into the woods, and in that pile of debris, they found Bart Halderson. Now, when I say they found Bart Halderson, they found a human torso. Someone had crudely chopped off the head, the arms, and sawed off the legs in the middle of the thigh, leaving the underwear on, in the beginnings of the pants. They rolled the torso over. There were gunshots in the back. This man had been shot in the back and chopped up. At this point, the farm, kind of an Eden of sorts, was turned into a crime scene. Police swarmed the place. Drones were in the air, cadavers, dogs were on the ground. Everyone's looking through absolutely everything they could, but it's a farm. There's a million places things could be. But one detective said, look at that in the woods. Is that a garbage can full of a tarp? It was. And I'll tell you that tarp was taken to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab eventually. Bart Halderson, Krista Halderson, their blood is all over it. Another detective said that spot where Chandler was walking out of the woods, there's an oil barrel there, like an old fuel tank with a hole in it. So she peeks her head in, and that's what she sees. Broken saw blades, hand saws, scissors, tree loppers, all of them tested by the State Crime Lab. All of them covered human flesh and blood of Bart and Krista Halderson. The farm was searched extensively, and I'll tell you that some months later, and they're in a barn about 100 yards from where Bart Halderson was found, the murder weapon, behind a bunch of boards. At this point in the investigation, the police knew they needed to start talking to Chandler. He's seen coming out of the location where his dad's body was, brutally chopped apart. So they do what police do. They bring him downtown. But they ask him, and he's at the house, and they ask him and his girlfriend to come downtown with them. And they do. And that girlfriend, Kat, is in one room, and Chandler is in another. Chandler, and you'll see this, we'll play it, for over an hour meets with police, and again regurgitates this odd story of his parents with this missing couple going places that no one really knew. Where Kat, in the other room, she's vomiting information to the police. And she knows when someone's missing, you got to exclude the people closest to him first. And she thought, that's what we got to do. Chandler didn't have anything to do with this. I didn't have anything to do with this. We got to get to the people who did. And the first step is we got to exclude us. She didn't for a second think that Mr. Halderson had done anything wrong. She thought she was with him most of the weekend. And I'll tell you right now, Kat did nothing wrong. Kat was an unknowing, unwilling accomplice to some of this, but she did absolutely nothing wrong. And she'll tell you, she liked Mr. and Mrs. Halderson. Her phone is full of messages between her and Mrs. Halderson. Kat meets with police not just once, but multiple times. And in one of these meetings, she says, you know what was weird? Is this weekend, when I was with Chandler, while his parents were at the cabin, I left the house early one day. He told me he was gonna do chores that morning around the house. But when I looked at my Snapchat, I saw his location was in a weird spot. And she goes, it was so weird where he was, I took a screenshot of it on my phone. And that's what it showed. Chandler was saved as hubby in her phone. That's a term of endearment between two folks dating in their 20s. But she said, at 8:58 in the morning, when he was supposed to be doing chores on Saturday, July 3rd, I thought it was strange that he was in what appears to be a forest on the banks of the Wisconsin River near Prairie du Sac. The police took that, and they identified immediately where that location was. The drones go up, the dogs go out, the search team starts searching. Very quickly, they find the remains of Krista Halderson. Now, when I say Krista Halderson, I have to qualify that as well. We found her legs. One complete leg, then somewhat farther away in another bush, a foot, a thigh, crudely cut apart with appears to be handsaws, axes. No more of Krista Halderson that's identifiable to her will ever be found. At this point, police thought, this is just a strange location. Why would Chandler be out there? He'd been out there before. And they started talking to people, including girlfriends of his in the past, friends of his. And they say, yeah, Chandler really liked this location out on the Wisconsin River. He'd go there all the time. It's where he'd go swimming. When his friends came into town, that was the secret swimming spot. And one friend even said, you know what? Last year he sent me a picture while he was out there, kind of shirtless, hanging from a tree with a machete. I don't know. Didn't have a lot of significance at the time when the police saw it, but eventually someone realized the tree looks unique. Interesting V pattern, the hollowness of the tree as it goes down. And eventually one of the detectives realizes why. It was the exact location he ditched his mother's remains. That's about 100 feet away. It shouldn't come to anyone's surprise at some point Chandler was arrested. So Chandler is taken to jail, and the police start searching. When I say searching, you're going to hear about searches of the house, searches of this farm, searches of this property. You're going to hear about searches of landfills and ponds and ditches all across Dane County. But one of the things they started searching was, what was this guy doing on his phone that weekend? And oddly enough, most of what they found was nothing. Either Chandler hadn't Googled anything all weekend, except for the 8th, or he had deleted his search history. You'll never know. But remember, he was arrested on July 8th, taken to the police station, and that's where they told him, hey man, we know what's going on. So meaning, while he was still on his phone on July 8th, he was still telling everyone his parents were missing. Not just the police. This kid was standing in his front lawn giving media interviews to all the local media outlets about the cabin and the unknown couple and the unknown car. He was going door to door in his neighborhood. My parents are missing. Can you help me out? Do you have any security cameras, by the way? And you'll hear from these neighbors. Some of them were so weirded out by what was going on that they secretly recorded those conversations. One of them, you'll hear, was a man who'd only been retired as a detective with the City of Madison Police for about a month. He recorded his conversation with Mr. Halderson. But while he's doing this that morning, what's he Googling? This is what he's Googling. Body found, Wisconsin. Woman's body found, Wisconsin. Wisconsin dismembered body found. We'll come back to the next two. Dead body found in Wisconsin. Body found in Milwaukee River. He's searching for whether they found his parents. And you'll hear in this case, he's starting to search because he's starting to get worried because the amount of police in his neighborhood has been ramping up and up and up because unbeknownst to him, they're finding his parents' remains. And you'll hear that while this is going on, while he's Googling these things, he's frantically calling police officers. Hey, why are there more cops in my neighborhood? Calls this guy, Brian Shunk. He records him. What's going on? There's more cops. Did something happen? Did you find something? The middle ones, State versus Peter Capuzzo. Probably means nothing to everyone. It meant nothing to me when I first saw it. The name rung a bell, and I wondered why. Not only does it show he Googled State versus Peter Capuzzo, it showed that he clicked on a link on the Wisconsin court's website and read something. What he read was a legal case, much like this one is the State versus Chandler Halderson. The State versus Peter Capuzzo, though, was a case that made it to the Court of Appeals based on some legal technicalities about a man who dismembered part of his family and threw their bodies in the river. So at the same time Chandler Halderson is going door to door in his neighborhood, crying about his parents being missing, he's conducting legal research to get himself out of today, so that today never happens. Now, when I started, and I said the police were initially thrown off because of one thing, and that was this text message from Krista. And it's real. It's in all the search warrant returns from US Cellular. It's on the phone that we were able to search. We're not able to search every phone, but some of them are. Made it safely. Can't get anything through, though. Yes, it's packed. Going to White Lake today for the parade. Be home Monday night, Tuesday. Love you lots. Sent on the 4th of July. So the police started looking into that. And the first thing they found was White Lake. The parade was on July 3rd. Remember, the 4th of July this year was on a Sunday. So everyone celebrated on Saturday. So they started thinking, well, how the hell did this message get sent? So they searched the Halderson home, where Chandler was. And in the garage, under a shelf, in a shoe, wrapped in aluminum foil, was his mother's phone, along with her driver's license. Police would later look into what cell towers were being used when that message was sent. If you didn't know, all of you probably have cell phones. At any time, your phone is pinging off of different cell towers. As you sit here, half of you might be using one tower and half of you might be using another. But it's generally an approximate area of where you are. The message was sent from the Halderson home. Chandler sent it to himself. The investigators began to wonder, and perhaps you're beginning to wonder how the evidence will come out. How does this kid, with everything in the world going for him, promising new jobs, school, a girlfriend that loves him, or even physically, a kid who just suffered this major concussion, was unable to use his legs for the most part, how does this happen? It happens because none of these things are true. He wasn't going to Madison College. He wasn't studying renewable resource engineering. The people at American Family Insurance, they'd never even heard of him. There's no indication he'd ever even applied for a job, much less had any job at SpaceX. The apartment he told his girlfriend he'd rented and the car he'd bought, none of that was real. The Madison police, they don't even have a scuba diving team. And this concussion he apparently suffered, he did go to the hospital. You'll hear from the doctor who was there. Said, yeah, he came in, he reported that he hit his head falling down the stairs. I diagnosed him with a mild concussion, gave him a neck brace on the way out, told him he could use it if he needed it. The leg weakness, his inability to move, drive, travel, none of that was real. And given what you're going to find out in this case, you may conclude at the end of it, he never suffered any fall at all. What you may conclude is that it was all made up. Now, police started looking into all of these lies. Because how does a person who looks so promising, was able to convince so many people of his success, how are you able to keep this up? How are you able to catfish your family, your girlfriend, your brother, your friends? And they started to find things around the Halderson home in the email accounts of Bart and Krista Halderson. When they talked about American Family Insurance, the first big lie Chandler was making up, Chandler had been claiming to work there for a year, but he never had any money. And his father was an accountant, so his father would ask him questions pretty much daily. Why don't you have any money? Why haven't you paid any rent? And Chandler spun an amazing web of lies. First it was, well, I'm a salary guy, but they were accidentally paying me hourly, so they just held my paychecks until they fixed it. Then it was, well, I gave them the wrong direct deposit info. Then it kind of shifted eventually, and he said, well, they were going to pay me, but now the amount is so much, they got to pay me so much money that when they deposited it in the bank, they thought it was fake. And police started to find emails like this. This from Tom Selznick, a guy at American Family Insurance in the Northeast, describing this. You're registered as salary, but you're making hourly. And these emails would go back and forth with Chandler and the HR person, and eventually he'd forward them to his father. And for one, notice, why is the guy who's the human resources manager spelling the word resources wrong, saying he's the human recourses manager? It's comically fake. He emailed himself back and forth, trying to explain why he didn't have any money, and he forwards it to his dad. Having a fake job solves a lot of riddles in your life. No one's hassling you to get a new job. No one's hassling you to do chores all day. The problem is, if your dad works for home, and which he did, you actually have to wake up early every day and go to work. So Chandler woke up, but he had nothing to do all day because his job was pretend, and so he sat on his computer playing video games. And I'm not against people playing video games. I'm a guy myself. But video games, if you don't know, are a much more social thing than they used to be. When you play video games, you don't just sit on Nintendo 64 and play Mario by yourself. You're playing role-player games with people from around the world. And who's up early in the morning when Mr. Halderson had to wake up to attend his fake work meetings? People in the military who are stationed overseas. They speak English, they're American, but they're on a different time schedule. They're on his time schedule. Most people here probably play video games at night during weekdays. But every day, Mr. Halderson was able to wake up and find a group of friends to play video games with online, one of which was stationed in Germany. This friend was a guy named Andrew Smith. Now, Mr. Smith, Mr. Halderson became kind of best friends. They communicated in this video game all the time. And Mr. Smith, he'll testify, he's coming up here, lives down south. He'll tell you that Chandler really liked an SKS rifle when they'd play some of these shooting games. It was just something he liked. But this past summer, about a month before the murders of Bart and Krista Halderson, this online friend, Andrew Smith, comes to visit Mr. Halderson and in fact stays at the home with Bart and Krista. This is a picture of Mr. Smith in that crudely designed yellow shirt. That's Mr. Halderson. You'll learn that Mr. Smith had gotten out of the military, but you'll also learn that he really likes guns. And he knew his friend liked SKS rifles, so when he visited him this year in June, he brought with him a gift, the SKS rifle. Now, you'll meet Mr. Smith, and you'll probably concur with me after meeting him. He's not really probably a paperwork kind of guy. And so when he gave the gun to Mr. Halderson, he wanted to document that he transferred the gun, that he wasn't going to fill out any paperwork. So he just took the serial number of the gun, he put Mr. Halderson's driver's license next to it, and snapped a picture on his phone. There's a clear picture of that. But that serial number matches the gun found in the barn 100 yards from Bart Halderson's body. And before Mr. Smith left, he decided he would gift his friend something else, which was about 400 rounds of high-powered ammunition. You'll hear from Mr. Smith. Police proved he was in Texas at the time all of this happened. Another unknowing accomplice to Mr. Halderson's crimes. So at this point, Mr. Halderson's working a pretend job at American Family Insurance. He's not getting paid. His father, who's an accountant, is kind of on his case about it. He's got to figure out something else. And the best way out of your pretend job is an even more pretend job. He's going to be an astronaut. I work at SpaceX. This is messages to his girlfriend. I have a good feeling about SpaceX. I have a follow-up interview for Florida tomorrow. Shoot, sorry, I got the job. I have training next week over the computer. He didn't give himself a lot of time, but what he gave himself was an escape hatch. He could move. He could end the lies that he had going on in his life about being a rescue scuba diver and working for American Family Insurance by simply moving to Florida. That presented with it one major problem, which was that job, which was also make-believe, would pay absolutely no better than the last job that was make-believe. So in late June, as he's supposed to start the job at SpaceX in Florida for Elon Musk, something happens in the Halderson family, something real. His older brother gets hospitalized. That's real. It happened. Got diagnosed with diabetes and was having some complications. He's doing great now. Mr. Halderson uses that as an excuse to delay starting at SpaceX. It was a stroke of good luck for him, a stroke of bad luck, of course, for the family, but a stroke of good luck for him. But that only gave him a couple of weeks. So his brother, who's doing really well in life, engaged, house, real job, making a lot of money, suddenly he's in the hospital, being doted over by his family, by his mother. So roughly a week later, guess who ends up in the hospital? Being doted over by his mother with a supposed neck injury. This is Father's Day of this year. Of course, Chandler wearing a neck brace that no one told him he had to wear on the left. Now, around this time, Chandler started telling people an extraordinarily bizarre set of claims. That he had a brain bleed, a hematoma, that he had spinal damage, that he needed his head drilled open, that he had inability to use his legs at all, couldn't drive, people had to do that for him, that he had nerve damage, that he needed to get a colostomy bag. But most importantly, he couldn't go to Florida. The doctors had told him he couldn't fly. Of course, that's not true. You'll see his medical records and you'll see his doctor testify. So suddenly this man, who was, for all intents and purposes, disabled, was being doted over by his family. People were making him meals. You'll see notes his mom was leaving for him. Call this neighbor if you need anything. She'll help you out. Couldn't drive, couldn't work, couldn't do chores. Now, a bit of a preview and a fast forward. This guy who's wearing a neck brace nearly every day in late June 2021 would have no problem just days later carrying large bags of ice out of gas stations to chill his father's cut-up body in a freezer. And you'll note, no neck brace. And in fact, you'll note in this case, Chandler Halderson is never seen in that neck brace again after July 1st, 2021, when he kills his parents. So the job lies are over for Chandler in his life. American Family Insurance, don't worry about that because he got this new job at SpaceX. In SpaceX, I can't go because I'm hurt. It was a perfect scenario. But there was one last lie that Chandler had to get out of, and that is he had told everyone he was going to MATC for college and that he was about to graduate. And you'll hear there's a hint of truth to that he was going there at one point. In fact, there's a hint of truth to all of these lies. He did go to MATC for like a semester. He failed out, but he wasn't going there anymore. And the parents were starting to grow suspicious. And we knew this because when we searched the house, we started to find notes on Bart Halderson's desk. Bart Halderson was one of these guys who prints his emails. That was Bart. And we find one. It's an email between Bart and Krista detailing a conversation that he had had with Chandler's advisors at MATC. He was supposed to meet with someone else, so we met with this guy, Daniel Spieth. Chandler's going to get a solar certificate. He wasn't. He's registered for fall classes. He wasn't. He's in the IT program. He wasn't. All of these things, line by line, none of them true. But Bart Halderson talked to this person. So police honed in on something, that line. When I talked to the advisor, he sounds just like Chaz on the phone. That is, of course, because Bart Halderson, when he talked to Chandler's college advisor, was just talking to Chandler, who had bought a burner phone. And police know that because they searched Chandler's bedroom, and in his desk drawer, they found that phone. Now, this kept going. The lie about going to MATC or Madison College was the most extensive. There were emails, dozens, if not hundreds of emails, going back and forth between supposed advisors at MATC, and then he'd forward them to his dad from people like someone named Alyssa Brandt, 64. Sometimes Chandler would spell Brandt, B-R-A-N-D-T, sometimes just with a T and no D. But they all had the @Gmail address, not at madisoncollege.edu. And you'll hear from the people at Madison College, their people have real emails. They don't use Gmail. But it was over and over again. Alyssa Brandt was one of them. You heard about Daniel Spieth, also at Gmail. There was someone named Aaron Hoover, also at Gmail. In this one, Chandler's getting upset. I have to have a call with whomever's in charge within the next 30 minutes. I have been a student for over 3 years and I will be treated fairly. Of course, he's yelling at himself. All of these were fake, back and forth to himself and eventually to his dad. The Halderson parents had to have been growing extraordinarily frustrated. Kid wasn't getting paid. He was injured suddenly. His college transcripts aren't coming through, so he can't get a job. So police looked at that original note again, and they saw something interesting, which is in this sea of fake people, Daniel Spieth, Aaron Hoover, Tom Selznick, Alyssa Brandt, there was one name that stood out, Omar Jobe. And that name didn't stand out because it was fake. It stood out to the police because it was real. That is the only real person on any of these emails. And what we've discovered in this investigation is in just the day and a half prior to being murdered, Bart Halderson Chandler's dad called MATC and pretended to be Chandler to try to finally get some information on what's going on. Just as any of you could call any doctor and pretend to be your kid, you know their name, their social security number, their birthday, you can get through. You can get through those minor security things. Bart called MATC, said, I'm Chandler, and I want some answers. And for 17 minutes, Bart Halderson, just before his murder, talked to a man named Omar Job. Omar Job is a entry-level customer service guy at MATC. He's got no skin in the game, doesn't even really remember the call, but it was recorded for customer service purposes. And Bart Halderson questions Omar, and he's very mean at first, because in his mind, he'd been getting screwed around for a year on where his son's transcripts were and what degree program he was in and why he hasn't graduated yet. But toward the end of the call, Bart asked Omar Job, hey, do any of these people work there? Alyssa Brandt, Daniel Spieth, Aaron Hoover? And he's told no, they've never worked there. And he says, that'll be it then. That'll be it then are the last recorded words of Bart Halderson alive. Bart Halderson, shortly after that, sends a text message that ultimately sealed his fate, which was a text to his own son. And it says, I spoke with Omar Job. Now, what happens over the next 24 or so hours is a bit unknown. Homicide investigations are a lot of unknowns because the two people who are the victims, who maybe know the most about what happened, are of course dead. But there's not much verifiable information that happens over the next 24 hours. It's also unknown if Chandler even knew who Omar Job was. Of course, he wasn't going to MATC, so why would he know who some entry-level customer service guy was? He wouldn't. But Bart Halderson did. And when you look at Bart Halderson's work calendar that he maintains at his accounting firm, you see something quite interesting. Remember at the beginning, I said I wanted you to remember a date and a time, which was that the Haldersons were killed between 3 and 5 p.m., July 1st, 2021. Guess what was on Bart's calendar at that exact time? He was supposed to have a meeting with the people at MATC with his son. Of course, that meeting couldn't happen because he wasn't going there, and none of the people were real, but Bart Halderson knew that. Bart Halderson knew. And so Chandler had obviously figured that out at this point. There was no way out of this one. You can't get out of this lie. And so the next day, Chandler Halderson wakes up on July 1st and starts messaging his girlfriend. 7:26, I hardly slept. 7:27, stuff hasn't been going well for me lately. Just trying to plan for the next thing to fuck me over. 7:51, I had a great future planned. It's falling apart. 1:04, just 2 hours prior to the murders. I overheard they might go to the cabin with their friends, but I don't know. So somewhat of a full circle at this point. That's the moment Chandler Halderson decides to kill his parents and engage in this bizarre story of them missing at a cabin with an unknown couple in an unknown car at 1:04, July 1st. Now, shortly after this message, Bart Halderson's getting ready to go to MATC for this meeting, perhaps to confront Chandler. Perhaps Chandler's going to confront him. Bart texts Chandler, I'm ready whenever you are. That's about 50 minutes prior to when he was killed. Those are the last words ever recorded of Bart Halderson. He never goes back to work. No one ever sees him. The neighborhood he lives in, riddled with security cameras, never see him again. What the evidence will show in this case is that sometime after the I'm ready whenever you are message, and probably just around 3 o'clock when he was supposed to go to this meeting with MATC, Bart Halderson was shot in the back multiple times with a high-powered rifle. And after shooting his dad, Chandler texts his mom, Dad's phone died, text or call me, and get sewed on your way home. I have an extra hour of work. That's about 50 minutes prior to when he was killed. Those are the last words ever recorded of Bart Halderson. He never goes back to work. No one ever sees him. What the evidence will show in this case is that sometime after the I'm ready whenever you are message, Bart Halderson was shot in the back multiple times with a high-powered rifle. And after shooting his dad, Chandler texts his mom, Dad's phone died, text or call me, and get sewed on your way home. I have an extra hour of work. You know he didn't have an extra hour of work, but he was delaying her getting there because the evidence will show he needed to prepare for what he was about to do when she showed up. She responds, K.I. Ken, smiley face. Those are the last words of Krista Halderson alive. Shortly thereafter, around just after 5, neighborhood security cameras, the Haldersons didn't have one, but the neighborhood, a lot of people did, show Krista pulling in, getting out of the car, walking in. She's never seen again until her legs are found out by the Wisconsin River. But just after killing his mom and his dad, the evidence in this case will show that Chandler went on his phone. If you go on your phone, I don't know if any of you ever taken a note. You can take notes on your phone. iPhone has an app called Notes. But Chandler creates a note about 5:11 that day on July 1st, probably minutes after killing his parents. And the note reads, weekend chores, H2O2 lemon. H2O2 is the chemical name for hydrogen peroxide. It's a pretty cheap cleaning product. So Chandler writes a note after murdering his parents, H2O2 lemon, door handles, move your shit upstairs, get a job, and clean the floor. He then does just that. spends the afternoon cleaning the house, eventually jumps in the shower. We know he's in the shower because his girlfriend and him FaceTime when they're in the shower. They say their good nights, and Chandler says, I'm going to bed, but he doesn't. He goes to gas stations. And he's carrying out large bags of ice, because what Chandler had done that night is what you all probably suspect by now. He had dismembered his parents and had to fit them inside of freezers that were in the Halderson home. That night, what the evidence will show is Mr. Halderson took items from around the house and began cutting apart his parents. Saw blades covered in Bart and Krista's blood. An axe, hand saws, things of that sort covered in Bart and Krista's blood. He cleaned the house as best he could, and you'll hear about that. But still, blood spatter found of Bart and Krista's blood around the house. And he had a plan. It wasn't a well-thought-out plan, but he had one. And that was he was going to burn the remains in the family fireplace. So it's July 1st. And if any of you remember, 4th of July weekend's pretty hot this year. People in the neighborhood thought it was a little bit weird. So much fireplace was going on. They smelled stuff. One retired cop said, I smelled like a barbecue, smelled like a pig roast. And he said that just not knowing what it was at the time, talking to the police. And that night, a neighbor who had a security camera behind the Halderson home was able to catch something. Because it was pitch black at night, he was able to catch just a little glimpse of all the windows in the Halderson house. And the window it was the window by the fireplace. And for many hours over the course of that night, the light flickered, came on, died down, on, down. But in the early morning hours the next day, he'd been up all night doing this. Because you'll learn, you really can't burn human remains. Your home fireplace is not going to get hot enough to do that. But eventually, in the middle of the night, the fire started going well. It appeared that air was being pumped into it, and you'll see when they searched the Halderson home, there was in fact a fan found right next to the fireplace, next to a tape measure, trying to make sure the remains were the right size as they went into the fireplace. But that light at one point grew and grew and grew, and it got very bright in one room. And then all of a sudden, the kitchen light came on, and then all the lights went out. I don't know if anyone's ever taken a hot Pyrex pan out of the stove and put water in it, or dumped hot water on your windshield on your car in the winter, but it explodes the glass. The evidence in this case will show that what happened was the fire had gotten out of control, burning these human remains. Human fat was rendering out. It was igniting. So Chandler threw water on it. But when you throw water on your residential fireplace, you break the glass. And that's exactly what happened. Just above that broken glass panel, which is clearly shattered, you see the paint kind of bubbled off from the heat. Despite being clearly used, the logs are rebuilt. Someone had cleaned out all the ashes and rebuilt it. Clean logs, newspaper, one burnt piece in the middle. But what stuck out to police right away was that little rock right there. They thought, what is that? So they pulled it off and they put it on one of these fancy police deals. And the forensic anthropologist took one look at it. And she said, oh, this is a human skull. He had burned his parents' heads in that fireplace. Later, the police would go through the ash trap of that fireplace, and they would find human remains, facial bones, the knee bones, which, because we found Krista's legs, by deduction, had to be Bart, all in the ash trap. So that's what happened. Now, you're going to hear about all of those days in between Bart and Krista dying at 3 o'clock on the 1st, all the way through the police report. But to summarize, Chandler stayed up all night that night of the 1st. Obviously, things weren't going well burning his parents' remains, so the next day, perhaps not having slept, he walked into Fleet Farm at 7:21 a.m. to buy a tarp. He's on video. He knew his girlfriend was spending the night that night, so he spent the whole day cleaning, but he's sending her text messages, which you will see throughout the day, asking her to bring him hydrogen peroxide and a mop, because he still needed to clean up. The next day, his girlfriend leaves early in the morning. That's the day she snaps that picture of him out by the Wisconsin River dumping off his mom's remains. He spends the rest of the day hanging out. But when he goes home and says he's going to bed that night, this young man who supposedly couldn't drive or carry heavy objects, his phone records show that he's up near the Wisconsin River in Portage. For about an hour, in the middle of the night, the police tried to search that area. It was impossible with the currents. Whatever remains were thrown in there are lost forever. July 4th, this is the day he texts himself. Spends the day with his girlfriend's family. Goes to their farm to use the pool. That's the day he says, hey, can I come back tomorrow? Goes to some fireworks. He's living a normal life. No mention of his parents. The next day, takes out the garbage in the morning. Who knows what was in that garbage can? He goes out to the farm to supposedly use the pool, where he's seen walking out of the woods. He never went to any doctor's appointment that day. Phone records show he never talked to any doctor. It was all a ruse to be able to go out in the woods and hide his father's body. The next day, not much happens because Chandler was up all night. Again, that light analysis shows all night, the garage light on and off. The garage, of course, being where we found some of these tools, the axe covered in blood. At 4:30 in the morning, for no apparent reason, he drives around the city of Madison. There's no idea what he did there. People begin questioning him about his parents. The person most worried, perhaps, is his girlfriend. She thought that was unlike them. The next day, he drives back to the farm, throws a bag of bloody rags into their garbage can, and at 11:22, he texts his girlfriend that he's finally going to the police. We know that bag of rags came from his house because they were in the Target bag his girlfriend picked up from Target, and she did the curbside pickup. So her name was printed on the outside. It was when she brought him hydrogen peroxide. He filled the bag with bloody rags and left it at the house. The next day, he starts Googling body found, Wisconsin dismembered body found. He's walking door to door asking about security cameras in his neighborhood. And at 4 p.m., they take him downtown and they arrest him at 6:41. So that's the story. That's why you're here for a couple weeks. Like I said in the beginning, a lot of cases end with the murder. This one, it's just a small piece of the puzzle. None of the things that happen after and none of the things happened before make any sense without knowing the murder happened on a specific day at a specific time. But the evidence in this case you'll find is overwhelming. Chandler Halderson killed his parents on July 1st, 2021. He cut up their bodies with axes and saws and knives. And he didn't even give them the dignity of having a funeral or even a final resting place in one piece or together. Their remains were scattered on farms, in garbage cans, in rivers, and perhaps every ditch is a possibility in this county. You're going to see terrible photographs. There were approximately 5,000 photographs taken in this case. You're going to see maybe total a couple hundred of actual body parts, maybe a couple dozen. We have scoured those photographs and tried to remove ones that are just horrible to see because of the conditions the bodies were in, because of insects and maggots and things of that sort, and instead are trying to only show you photographs that help you understand how the remains were hidden, where they were hidden, how they were dismembered. I'm not trying to pull on anyone's heartstrings. I'm not trying to make this overly emotional. You might feel emotional. I suspect many of you have never seen anything like what you're going to see in the next couple of weeks. But I promise to do my best to limit the amount. And lastly, I promise to just ask questions, a lot of questions. Because you're the jury in this case, and you deserve to hear absolutely everything. What happened here shouldn't happen, but it did. And so in a couple weeks, when I stand up here and Miss Raymond stands up here, I'm going to ask you to deliver a verdict of guilty, to finally bring some much-needed truth to Chandler Halderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Brown.